And it's going fairly well. Hello and welcome to the third installment of the Media Musings Mega Mythos month. Um, and hello to Natja and anyone who else who is lurking in the chat and or watching in the future. Um, this week we are covering Spider-Man,
No,
specifically Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2002.
no, his name's not Spiderman.
Yeah, it's the human spider.
Oh,
And first, um, there is the obvious discussion of how Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is basically a movie about puberty,
Yeah,
but
mhm.
that's not really enmeshing with the theme that we are going with this month. So we are going to acknowledge it and wave at it as it passes by.
yeah. I will say every sort of pre-2003 superhero movie is
Yeah.
pretty much a movie about puberty.
Yeah,
Like even the X-Men to some extent has that that thematic thing going on. But yeah, it's there. It's very obviously there. Like it shouts it at you in the car that it's there.
yeah,
But it's also like, dude, watching this as an adult, they seem so like, don't get me wrong, the actors look about 30.
yeah,
But their characters seem so young watching this as an adult. When I saw this
yeah.
movie, I was about 10. I've not seen it since. And wow, times have changed. I can't
Yeah.
tell if I've grown up or if times have changed or it's a mixture of the two. Probably a mixture of the two.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And
So,
but though, given the your human spider comments, that brings up a big a big theme that I really like in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. More the first and the second one because it doesn't really come up in the third. In that everyone's identity is assigned to them by a media figure. Well, everyone who has a costumed identity,
yeah.
their name is assigned to them by a media figure. With Spider-Man, it's Bruce Campbell,
I mean, to be fair,
and then J. Jonah Jameson labels Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin, and then in Spider-Man 2,
I want to call her. I want to call her every time someone says it.
yeah, he calls, he labels Dr. Otto Octavius as Doc Ock.
yeah. I mean, if you're going to have a journalist who's good at writing shock headlines in your story, that's what you use them for.
Yeah.
Like, that's exactly what a 2-bit red top banner headline newspaper editor would come up with.
Yeah.
Like, Piers Morgan looks at that guy and creams his pants. Like, he wishes he was that good. For those who aren't aware, Piers Morgan did a stint as a newspaper editor.
Yeah.
And unlike Jonathan, this Piers Morgan had no journalistic ethics. That's why it was a stint and not a career.
Yeah.
Let's just put it this way. He put a tweet up about something to do with Iraq earlier today, and I think a number of people said, given your track record there, Piers, I wouldn't be talking too much.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sleep well, Natja.
Have a good night, Archer.
Yeah.
So yeah. Are we taking this movie chronologically or thematically? How are we doing? Because we seem to have started thematically, but if you want to do it chronologically,
I don't mind chronologically. Yes, it's Ring. This is Ring's show, so we'll let Ring make the call. I think.
I like it, while it feels natural to like talk about it chronologically, I think it's best to stay with it thematically, given how a lot of the first act is basically Spider-Man powers as puberty metaphor.
yeah. Fair enough. Fine by me, because I find as well this film. I said it to Ring before we started. I said this film is going to be difficult to analyze because, frankly, there's not a lot to analyze. It's a bog standard superhero movie. Grab your popcorn, folks.
And very much unsubtle, which is I don't know. I haven't seen Evil Dead, but having seen the his Spider-Man trilogy and then Multiverse of Madness, not being subtle seems to be like Sam Raimi's calling card.
Yeah. And I will say as well with these, it's not subtle for a movie from 2001, 2002. But if you compare it to the kind of movies that are coming out now,
it seems quite cerebral in comparison, doesn't it?
It does. There are certain things done in it that are just there's things that happen in where if you saw that movie now, the character would probably turn to the screen and tell you.
Yeah.
Like it's quite jarring to see how media literacy has collapsed over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Let's not make any bones about this. This movie was not intended to be cerebral in any sense of the word.
Oh, no.
It's a popcorn movie. It's a superhero movie.
Yeah.
The average age of people watching it would have been about 12.
It like, if anything, it was basically like envisioned as a ripped from the panels superhero movie, which was actually kind of groundbreaking for its time, because like if you go if you look at other contemporary superhero movies, they almost they're almost ashamed to admit that they're a superhero movie. Like even X-Men, makes jokes about we're poking fun at at their origin, with Cyclops, is like, oh, what's next? Yellow spandex? Or what would be better, yellow spandex?
Yeah.
And it does. And there's an innocence this movie has. And again, I don't think the innocence is necessarily... I think there's textual, contextual, and extra textual reasons for it.
Yeah.
So within the text, obviously, it's the start of a franchise. It's the first one. It's the pilot. It's good. It's got its innocence.
Yeah.
It's also a film that was made with very little input by executives.
Yeah.
Then you've got the context of it being post-global war on terror. It was made pre 9/11.
Yeah.
Which really, it makes you realize what a different world we were living in.
Yeah. And so since we're bringing up 9/11.
Yeah, it only took 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, wait.
Yeah, you've gone 10 minutes.
11 minutes.
Yeah.
11 minutes.
Well, so with like the reason I picked Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 next week to as our example of, superheroes and the American mythos, especially post 9/11, is because the impact that specifically the bridge scene had on post 9/11 America is like the first bit of unifying catharsis that we got, at least from the box office.
Yeah, and I will say that scene hits different post 9/11. Pre 9/11, it's funny because, of course, New Yorkers are going to throw bricks at the Green Goblin. Like, the whole world knows that New Yorkers are fucking tapped in the head.
Yeah.
Post 9/11, you're coming off the back of that wave of almost worldwide goodwill towards New Yorkers. New Yorkers dropped everything on the morning of 9/11. People literally left their workplaces to go and help at the rubble. People were coming into America from all over the country to help. And the people really came together. Like, retired doctors were going down to the scene to offer medical help.
Yeah.
All the local hospitals basically left a skeleton crew in the hospital and went down to the site to try and help. And people, free, like, even down to the street vendors were giving away free coffee or free food to the people helping. Like, it was one of those moments where, if you didn't know what was going to come after it, for a few short days, that really gave hope in humanity because people came together. Like, I mean, until they started screaming about "let's go to war" with all that jazz.
Yeah.
But for a few short days, it really was. It was this almost. It feels. I think we lived those days with rose-tinted glasses for what New York was and what New York came to represent in those days. It came to represent a community. Like, you had this massive city of like millions of people, and every single one of them in that moment pulled together.
Yeah.
Or at least that was how it looked from the outside.
It was. I'm gonna say it was such a feel-good moment that for at least a few days we actually thought Rudy Giuliani wasn't such a bad guy.
He got Time Man of the Year that year because of his response to 9/11. And, I remember I was in school at the time. Our school did a collection for the rescuers of New York. We did we had like an unclosed school day, which is a standard thing schools do in the UK because we wear uniforms. Kids come into school for a day in non-uniform clothes and pay £1 each. You've got 1,000 kids in a school. That, it makes money quite quickly. It's a quick way to make money. We did bake sales. We had we were doing it, and we were sending the money to the charities, to like the Red Cross, who were there on the ground giving the rescuers bottles of water and helping pull people out, because there was just this sense of it sounds like I've eaten the propaganda. I haven't. But there was this sense of, for a few days, everyone was a New Yorker. The whole world was New York for a few days.
Yeah,
we all got together, and all we cared about was getting people out and helping.
It's
in the weeks between 9/11 and the beginning of the GWOT, or the Global War on Terror.
It was about 12 days, so not even weeks. Like, it was 12 days.
Well, almost 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It was a case of, you mess and then afterwards it became you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us.
Yeah.
It went from the bridge scene in Spiderman to and then 2 weeks later, America, fuck yeah.
Yeah, basically. But it was this sense of that bridge scene hits different, and that guy yelling, "How dare you attack someone who's just trying to save some kids?" You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. We're New Yorkers, and there was like I was British, and I've got no real patriotism for America. You know, I'm a great critic of America and its politics, but we were all New Yorkers for a week, and we were all American, and we were all patriots, and we would have all bled to keep your flag red that week because people had already bled, and America was standing up and saying, "No, we look after our own, and we're gonna rebuild, and we're gonna come back better." And that was it from the outside. Now, obviously, looking back on it, there was all kinds of hell going on. There was, you know, an uptick in racial tensions, an uptick in religious tensions, and that all happened. But there was this, and it was a shining moment.
Yeah.
And of course, we went and ruined it. But there was a lot of good going on there. And every time I think of it, I don't know about you, there's a quote by Mr. Rogers: when something goes wrong,
look for the helpers.
That almost became the rallying cry of 9/11. Or at least it did. Maybe because it was child friendly, it's what I heard being in school. But that almost became the rallying cry of, we have to help the helpers. Look for the helpers. These terrible things happened, but look at good people coming together. And I will say that is still to this day, I'm sure Scummer will back me up on this.
Yeah.
New Yorkers, New Yorkers have got a reputation like Parisians. They're rude. They'll send you down the wrong street. They've got no time for you. They're like Londoners or any major city.
Yeah.
But everyone knows you don't fuck New York because New York fucks back.
I think just to clarify on that, okay, because I don't know about Noodle. I've never been to New York, but what I'm not saying that anyone from New York is watching this. Yeah, this is a perception. There's a perception. Now, it may not be true. I don't know, but that's a sort of perception. Londoners, I'll quite happily say it's fucking true about. I've been in London enough times to say, fuck
Londoners.
Fuck London.
But there is this perception of New Yorkers are rude, arrogant, loud, all of those things. But at their hearts, they're good people who will come together if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
You see it all the time, news stories of people falling on rail tracks and New Yorkers pushing the train and stuff. You see it once, and it happens often enough that has become the city's identity. It doesn't matter who you are in New York. If something goes wrong, someone will help you.
Yeah.
I'm aware of stories. You see it on social media all the time. Don't ask for help in a New York subway. If New Yorkers are the kind of people, if you're struggling to get down the stairs of a New York subway with bags or with a pram, some randomer who's yelling down his phone will just pick up the other end of the pram or the bags or whatever, walk to the top, put them down, and not even look at you and carry on walking.
Yeah.
That's the perception of New York from the outside.
Well, actually, I'll say this: The Simpsons did a very good perception in New York. Unfortunately, they don't show that episode because the Twin Towers were quite central to that. But there was kind of the joke there of the people shouting out across the towers at one another, like in the thick New York accents. Yeah, they stick all the jerks in Tower 1, which obviously they for fairly obvious reasons after 9/11 they don't show that episode, but that was that episode of The Simpsons, if anyone remembers it's Homer versus New York. And
look, I will pass the comment. New York built 2 giant buildings in the middle of it. Because if Paris has 1 dick, New York must have 2.
New York's got so fucking many, though.
Yeah.
I think it's been long enough. It's safe to crack that joke.
Yeah, there were the Twin Towers, of the World Trade Center. There's the Empire State Building. There's
Chrysler Building.
But you cannot talk about Spider-Man's place in American cinema without talking about how the bridge scene accidentally encapsulated America's response to 9/11.
Yeah.
And
it foreshadowed it.
yeah.
So just make sure I'm right in the timeline here. So I think this film was released after 9/11, but it was made before. It was actually filmed and shot before 9/11, wasn't it?
Yeah, because
I'm remembering my timeline correctly here.
Yeah, there were trailers for it that had to be removed from air because it had Spiderman webbing a helicopter between the Twin Towers.
Yeah. Oh, of course, yes. You've jogged my memory. I vaguely remember that trailer now. Yeah.
It's probably you can probably find it in an archive somewhere.
Yeah.
It's probably on YouTube somewhere.
But it was. There is this sense of, because America. Let's be flat out honest. In the English speaking world, about 98% of cinema comes out of America. In the English speaking world, not accounting for things like Cannes, etc., that takes on European movies filmed in English, because those are not necessarily English speaking; they've just been dubbed or whatever.
Yeah, well, I'd probably say 98, maybe a little low, like probably 99.
I'm accounting for the British film industry, and I'm accounting for the odd thing that comes out of Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
So yeah, massive amounts of America, and the thing is, because of that, America has what academics call a soft. It's a form of soft imperialism. It's a soft sphere of influence,
or a sort of a form of cultural monopoly.
Yeah, it's cultural monopoly. It creates a cultural hegemony, and again, do you know what's weird? I'm actually considering how I'm wording this, because I'm aware we're talking about 9/11, which is probably a symptom of what I'm describing. So what America goes through, the rest of us go through by proxy.
Yeah.
Because 90% of everything we watch is going to be American made, be that TV, movies, even our news, our social media, 90% of it's American.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, America is really... The British Empire wishes it had the cultural impact of America.
Yeah.
And America very much has this. It thinks it's not an empire, or it likes to propagate the idea that it's not an empire, but it's an empire, and it's got a sphere of influence. That's why it keeps picking fights with Russia, and Russia keeps picking fights with America, because they're battling for the hearts and minds of Europe. That's what's going on. Because
or rather to say, you can either join me or you can selfishly sacrifice millions of innocents in our pointless struggle until one of us dies.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And this is what America does. So the thing is, lines like that in movies, America knows exactly what it's doing.
Yeah.
And I say America, you can take that to be Hollywood or American politicians or American culture in general.
Yeah.
The problem is American culture is so big and so broad that it's really hard to direct that one way or another.
Yeah.
You can't just say that American culture is deliberately shaping anything beyond its own borders.
Yeah.
All you can say for certain is Hollywood turns out these big blockbuster movies. The thing about Hollywood is, Hollywood will never put a lot of money into something that's not a surefire winner.
Yeah.
This is what the movie and the musical The Producers is about. The idea is, look, America is never going to challenge its audience. That's not what American cinema is for. If you want to be challenged, you go to the Cannes Film Festival. You don't go to Hollywood.
Yeah.
You know, you don't.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare that a film is made in Hollywood with any kind of real, money behind it.
Let's
That's
put it.
not guaranteed winner.
Let's put it this way: there's a reason why no major Hollywood studio has hired Ken Loach as a director.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, there's and the point is that Hollywood isn't just Hollywood directs a lot of what people think of America, a lot of what America thinks of itself. But Hollywood only ever reacts to what's already safe in America.
Yeah.
You didn't see gay people in American movies until after homosexuality became normalized. You didn't, unless they were the butt of the joke or the villain.
Yeah.
You didn't see, this is why there's this thing of representation in movies of black people, non-whites, gays, trans. That's why there's this push for representation, because Hollywood reacts to what's normal.
And
but
why
Hollywood is also uniquely placed to direct and decide what's normal.
And why, there's such a fundagelical backlash against anything so much as like a 2-second kiss in a movie.
Yes, because if you see it on screen, there's this understanding that if Hollywood is showing it, that means that the majority of Americans are not going to have a problem with it, because Hollywood would not take that risk.
Yeah.
Therefore, if Hollywood is not taking a risk and you don't like what Hollywood's doing, you're in the minority, and that hurts.
Yeah.
So it's a really nuanced discussion about the place Hollywood has in American culture, and does it direct it or does it respond to it? And it's a little bit of both.
I mean, there's a reason. Let's put it this way: there's a reason that the fundy Christians have their own little film industry.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But the point is with this is that Hollywood reacted to 9/11 just like everyone else did.
Yeah.
Oh, very deliberately so.
Yes, but Hollywood also exported that reaction.
Yeah.
So Hollywood reacts to what America's doing as a culture. America reacts with shock and horror and then wants revenge. Hollywood does the same. Hollywood then exports that reaction out to Britain, Australia, New Zealand. Most of the world watches cinema in English because it's Hollywood. That's where all the big movies, they're in English for a reason. It's Hollywood. That's where the money is. Yeah. Therefore, the entire world, for the most part, the English-speaking world, was spoon-fed that reaction to 9/11.
Yeah.
That's why we remember 9/11. But we don't necessarily, we do in Britain, but I don't think most Americans remember 7/7. I don't think, it was even weird that the 7/7 was called 7/7 to us. And the only reason for that is because it was a callback to 9/11.
Yeah.
The UK doesn't name dates like that.
See, the good thing about R1 is R1 works both in British date system and American date system.
Yeah.
Like, we don't, we don't call Remembrance Sunday 11/11, because it's a very American thing to call dates like that.
I think I first heard the term 9/11 maybe about 3 or 4 months after the actual event. It was just called like the New York attack or the Twin Towers attack. That was kind of what, and then I started hearing it September the 11th, and then I think eventually that just became 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas they were calling it 7/7/7/7 within a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they were latching onto that mentality, that very American.
Yeah.
It's our 9/11. Well, it's not. A few buses got blown up. We had like the death toll and the destruction.
No. Yeah. I was a bit more personally affected by, not too much by 7/7, but I was actually on the following day, you see, I was actually flying out.
Hang on, Scummy, you've frozen up.
Yeah, you've frozen.
But yeah, it's like everyone was saying no one wanted to fly. No one, even to this day, you'll get a cheaper flight if you fly out on 9/11.
Yeah.
From the UK, because no one wants to fly on that date. But realistically, probably the safest date to fly out because everyone's on high alert.
No, yeah. Well, it wasn't so much that. It was a friend of mine was coming from London to meet up with us, and of course we couldn't get hold of him for anything. We were really quite scared because we knew he was using public transport and stuff. So, so it was quite a nervous few hours until we heard from him. We were like,
9/11. My mum desperately tried to ring Manhattan because we've got family in Manhattan. And 7/7 again, desperately ringing family down in London. Is everyone okay? Is everyone at home? Do we know where everyone is?
Yeah.
Emergency hotlines spring up within hours, and the BBC's got the phone number plastered across the bottom of the screen. But the phone line went down after 20 minutes because so many people were ringing it.
Yeah.
It was one of those things because 7/7 was what, 2005?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where a lot of our reaction to 7/7 was modelled on 9/11. As much as it could be modelled, in the media very much tried to model it after 9/11, and the politicians very much tried to model themselves after 9/11. I think it was Ken Livingstone who was London mayor at the time.
I believe it would have been Ken. Yes.
Yes, it was Ken.
Yes,
and again, like Rudy Giuliani, although completely different politically, there was murmurings of he's going to be PM on the back of this.
No, I don't think so. No, there wasn't Noodle. I'm going to disagree.
There was where I was. There was.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I'll agree with, and even though I like Ken's politics, I'm going to be honest. I think the guy's a wanker. I have always done so.
No, I will say though, but the murmurings were he's going to spin this to make himself PM.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that he did anything to deserve it.
Yeah.
Which is what I was getting to.
And the irony it being the guy that beat him for London Mayor was the guy who spun it into becoming PM.
Yeah.
But anyways,
if I'd have known that's what you could get from going on Have I Got News for You, I wouldn't have had Dara O'Brien settle for Mock the Week.
But that being said, and this is probably more an audience reception thing than intended subtext, but for such a simple, small film, in terms of Hollywood blockbuster, or you can kind of read Spider-Man as a what's the word starts with M? As something of a metaphor for how America likes to see itself.
Very much so. Because again, it hits all those beats that were the propaganda that came out of New Yorkers clubbed together, of America standing up, the little guy. America's got very good at the propaganda. More discussion on propaganda here, and then I'll stop because you can go write your own essay.
Yeah.
America has always presented itself on the world stage as the underdog, the little guy.
Yeah.
And especially pre 9/11, there was almost an element of truth to that. Because America did not have the cultural monopoly that we view. In a way, the combination of 9/11, the global war on terror, and the sort of this is coming off the back of the late 90s, America didn't have that cultural monopoly in the 90s. Like, it just didn't.
Yeah.
And we saw, in the 90s, half of the things that come out of my mouth would have sounded American and weird to my ears.
Yeah.
Like, I remember a time we used to say okay, not all right. We used to say trousers, not pants. Just damn random linguistic stuff that we pick up from movies and this constant influx of media. But America always presented itself as the little guy. And therefore, because it was the little guy, it was allowed to do things that were not necessarily the best things.
Yeah.
It was allowed to be morally dubious and ethically questionable because it was clawing its way to the top. But then once it got there, it didn't shed that coat of being the little guy.
Yeah.
And looking at it now and looking back, that was allowed to happen. But then we still get that messaging from America. If America's the little guy, America's not.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, that messaging went from we're the little guy trying to get to the top to bootstrap theory.
Well,
we
rather
by our bootstraps. And well, no, you didn't.
Or rather, you know who I am. I'm your friendly neighborhood Wilsonian intervention.
Yeah, exactly. And it's this thing of America has this. America now knows its place in the world and doesn't try to hide it, but does still fall back on that. We're the good guy. We're fighting for the little guy. We're spreading democracy.
Yeah.
We're spreading democracy on the land because there's oil underneath it. They don't say that last bit out loud. And it's, again, getting into American politics.
Yeah.
It's kind of difficult not to when you're discussing a movie through the lens of the changes 9/11 brought about. Because, and I'll say this, and this might throw a firework into the discussion. 9/11 was probably, on a cultural level, the best thing that could have happened to America in 2001. And on a political and on a social level, because still 21 years after the fact, the memory of 9/11 is old enough to drink alcohol, and America is still using 9/11 to justify a lot of its foreign and domestic policy, and not all of it good.
It's a scary thought to think as well that we sometimes have a co-host on here who wasn't even born when that happened. So it's and also just a quick little tangent, but what we said about the very deliberateness after 9/11. I mean, Ring, you may remember this. The Bush government setting up the Office of Global Communications. And a lot of this was a very much
I was still in what you call primary school.
Okay. He's only a couple of years older than me, Summer.
I forget how fucking old I am. Everyone. But but a lot of the things they did was getting with a lot of the Hollywood people. And I mean, there was a big, I think a big mantra that came out of this was, we got to retell the American story to the world. That was a big phrase you heard a lot of the time.
Our terms,
yeah.
And there was this thing of, I'm gonna say something to you, and I want you to think about how you would have taken this comment past in late 2001 to how you take it now. After 9/11, the number of people who volunteered to join the American Army rocketed. In 2001, that was considered a good thing. That was a sign that Americans were coming together and wanted to protect their homeland. You look at it now and you think, holy shit, they drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
But I remember reading that. It's something like 10 times more people in the month after 9/11 volunteered for the Army and the Marines than had in the 6 months before it or something stupid.
Yeah.
Like, people were literally leaving Tower's side.
Oh yeah.
And walking to the army recruiters were on the site recruiting people.
I mean, the only thing in like British history I could even compare that to was the World War One. You know, the way that there was that fervor that everyone joined up. You know, but it's you know, for different reasons and so on. But it's the only thing in our history I can compare it to with everyone. There was this big fervor, a patriotic fervor for whatever reason, and everyone joined. You know, everyone. You know, you were ashamed not to volunteer.
Yeah, there was that sense of well, why haven't you volunteered? What are you doing to help?
Yeah.
And it was very much that was the propaganda, and we all, even in the UK, even the UK saw an uptick in military recruitment.
Yeah.
On the back of 9/11.
Well, I mean, and I would say that at the time, like in the UK, when there was still a lot of sympathy for it, there was not, like, should we say, a massive, should we say, anti-war movement initially when it came to Afghanistan. Now, when it came to Iraq, that was a different matter altogether. We suddenly had the biggest anti-war movement we ever seen, because I think a lot of the wave of sympathy and sympathy for America and anger at 9/11 was starting to cool. And I think also the fact that a lot of us were like looking at this thinking, hold on, yes, Saddam Hussein might be an asshole, but you're going after someone who had fuck all to do with 9/11.
And I was
people in this country, I mean, to this day, you will hear people in this country will call Tony Blair a war criminal.
He is a war criminal, and you can. I will go on record.
And I'll happily second that as well. I mean, he's got away. He's got away with. On paper, officially, he's not, but fuck it, he is.
He is. He's a warmonger and a war criminal, and he got away with murder. And I'll say it.
Yeah.
But I remember 2003. The main argument, like we did, I personally, I would have been 12, 13. I didn't know the ins and outs of the politics of Iraq. I knew Saddam Hussein. There was his murmurings he was a war criminal. There was a dossier that he was gassing some of his people, chemical weapons. That was all I knew, and frankly, I've not looked into it since. But what I did know.
That'd be a whole other stream for another day, Noodle. I can tell you a lot about that.
But what I did know, and the basis for my opposition to the Iraq War, was the Americans went into Afghanistan because of 9/11. And that's fair, because they got hit and they're hitting back, and they're after the people who did 9/11. That was the understanding we had of Afghanistan. But with Iraq, the main argument against Afghanistan is, what the fuck has Iraq got to do with 9/11? That was the argument. That was like 9/10 of the argument against Iraq. It was, if someone had said to us, okay, they're killing Kurds, and there was this thing of he's got chemical weapons, but there was no evidence he was going to use them. There was no real evidence he had them, as we found out later.
It turns out that he no longer did have them. I mean, yes, we know for a fact, yes, he had them in the 80s and before the first Gulf War.
Yeah, because
I think we're on a massive tangent here from Spiderman, by the way. But
I am circling to a point. I'm trying to get to a point.
Yeah.
The point is, this film gives, it has this sense of Spider-Man is being targeted by the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
He made himself known to the Green Goblin by clawing his way up and getting a reputation, and then and in that way it does kind of mirror American history. America built up, got attention, 9/11 happened, they were targeted, and they started to fight back. The thing is, Afghanistan, yes. Afghanistan, we understand why you did that. That makes something of logical sense if you believe, who did it and all the rest of it. That all tracks. But America has continued to claim that it's being targeted by these bad actors who did 9/11. Call them the Taliban, call them Al Qaeda, call them ISIS, whatever you want to call them. They're all the same organization whose name keeps changing and they keep moving around.
The axis of evil.
Yeah, the bad
guys. Or OPEC, as they're otherwise known.
Yeah, you know, it is what. But America's kept claiming they're being targeted, and they're just not. So America's still going after it. This is why there was no support by the end of Iraq and Afghanistan, just because you've been there so long. Like, there comes a point where people get fatigued, and I'm sorry. 20 years and you people still hold a 2-minute silence on 9/11. The fuck? Yeah. The actual fuck. Seriously. That event, horrendous though it was massively politicized. Real, like.
But we still hold 2 minutes silence for something that happened between 1914 and 1918.
Yes, but how many people died in that? That was a worldwide.
Okay, yeah.
You know, there was a point during COVID where more people were dying of COVID every day than died in 9/11.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it's quite clear that 9/11 was politicized in a way COVID wasn't.
Yeah.
And it differently politicized. They were both politicized in very different ways.
Yeah.
But 9/11 became the excuse, and you couldn't criticize American foreign policy for a while. Like, we all knew it was bullshit. We all knew it was George Bush looking to make Daddy proud, and you know, a war going on. But we couldn't. You couldn't criticize it out loud, because if you but what about 9/11? That's all you'd get back. And you're anti-American. You support the terrorists. There was a time when we were saying, you know, you had to actively say the words Muslim doesn't mean terrorist, because it got so politicized that even that statement was a political statement.
But come couple of years later in the anti-war movement against Iraq, a very popular T-shirt was one with George W. Bush, the world's number one terrorist. That was one of the biggest T-shirts going around on the left.
So, if we're taking the Spider-Man as a metaphor for America reading, that technically means J. Jonah Jameson is right.
I mean, yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
here's a menace.
I'm so glad it was the American who made that connection and made that comment.
Yeah.
You know, it's very America's got this. It likes to create its own mythology, and it. Look, if I could sit down with the people who came up with the propaganda and directed the propaganda after 9/11, wow. Because those people, like, move over Tolkien. Seriously, those people know how to write a fantasy story.
Let's just put it this way: these are the people that the Qataris should have hired. They shouldn't have bid for a World Cup because they wanted to clean their image up.
Yeah.
But
it's like to the point of how on earth did the Patriot Act go through without like opposition?
Yeah.
Like, when you look at what that thing did, wow. And that basically made it illegal to criticize America in the war on terror.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, America does have a history of passing shady acts during times of national outrage. Cough, Aliens and Sedition Act of 1913, I think it was.
Aliens, yes, I think so. But again, it's this thing of America knows how to use national tragedies to its own effect. And this all feeds into the American mythos. America likes to make itself the victim because America has learned, probably from Israel, that you know, when you make yourself the victim, you can get away with anything, including the things you were a victim of.
Which
And
is which is the one big differing point between America and Peter Parker is America's martyr complex is turned outwards, while Peter Parker's is turned inwards in something of a self-destructive spiral.
I think Peter Parker is what America thinks it is. America doesn't, as a culture, doesn't necessarily have the self-awareness to realize that all of its problems are its own fault.
Yeah.
Whereas Peter Parker sees the destruction that his behavior is bringing about.
Yeah.
And takes a step back and tries to fix it. Whereas America goes, no, that can't possibly be our fault.
Yeah. Like America like I said, Spider-Man is a metaphor for how America sees itself, while America is probably more of a Norman Osborn.
Yeah.
On that topic, are we going to discuss the military-industrial complex?
Yeah, might as well.
I'm just going to wave bye-bye to any, yeah. The military-industrial complex, for those who aren't aware, although how you've watched much of Media Musings and aren't, is a mystery to me, is a concept that was first put into words, and I say put into words, in the 40s. Yeah. And it's this idea that as long as there are people making profit from military arms, from bombs, from guns, there will always be war. Because the army wants the newest and shiniest but can't justify it unless there's a war to fight. The politicians want to keep the army happy, so the politicians find a war. And it's this idea of the people who promote war are the ones who will profit from it in some way, shape, or form.
Or to paraphrase from Voltaire, America doesn't have a military-industrial complex. The American military-industrial complex has a state.
Yeah. And the thing
sorry. So I don't mean to be just reading here. I'm trying to find this. I've just remembered trying to find this chapter in this about permanent arms economy. I think it might be useful for what we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
Permanent arms economy. You can Google all these terms and really look into them. When it was the idea of the military-industrial complex in the 20th century was really first spoken out loud on any kind of platform by, was it Truman or was it FDR?
I mean, the first time I remember it being heard was Eisenhower saying something about it in his farewell address, but I think the term does sort of go back further than him.
Yeah. So with Eisenhower and his farewell address, he really, that's the speech. If you want to understand the military-industrial complex, read that speech or listen to it. That gives a really good overview, and you can kind of take it from there and apply it wherever. It was not a new idea, and it certainly wasn't a new phenomena when he said it. He was just the first person to have the balls to say it. And it's a really interesting discussion to have about this, because this film goes out of its way to villainize the military-industrial complex. It's the nature versus technology. It's the villains are military and want military contracts and all of this, as opposed to the teenage boy who just wants to get on in life and do some good.
I mean, yeah, and I mean, if you even look at like Norman Osborn himself as a character within this, that really at the beginning he kind of think, okay, yes, he's obviously he can't be too good of a guy because he is a capitalist who's an arms manufacturer or whatever. So he can't be too good of a guy, but he seems like a sort of decent enough guy who's driven to desperation because
He's about to lose everything.
his competitor is going to put him out of business.
That the
yeah.
stereotypical desperate scientist.
Yes. Now I want to point something out to you. In the space of 20 years, Norman Osborn goes from being the villain to being the hero in Tony Stark.
Mm.
And that's a hell of a change.
Yeah.
We've gone from the military-industrial complex is evil. People who want military contacts are evil. The military uses technology to kill people. To, Iron Man! In 20 years.
I mean...
And that's a direct result of the war on terror and the propaganda.
Stan Lee himself even sort of like said that it was kind of like in a way that he was doing this when he came up with the idea of Iron Man and Tony Stark, that he was almost trying to just challenge himself in a way, knowing that there was the anti-war movement going on of, can I make a character who's like he's a multi-millionaire arms dealer and somehow make him likable?
Yeah.
So Stan Lee even said that was what was in his head when he created the character. Can I make someone like this likable, especially in this climate?
I think it's really telling though that the audience accepted that without questioning it and was willing to be spoon-fed that. In a way, we definitely weren't pre 9/11. If you'd have introduced Tony Stark any time before about 2005, he'd have been a one-hit wonder in one magazine and would have disappeared because he'd have been trashed.
Yeah.
He was not. The audience was not willing to accept that.
I think the fact is,
years of the war on terror, and people are ready to fall in line.
But they did have to do something a little bit I said different but significant with Iron Man's character being the reason for his heart issues, which is just in the comics. I believe he just naturally had a weak heart. In this, that it was a result of war, and it's like, I'm suffering from the consequence.
No, in the comics, he also had the fragments because
is that in the original?
Yeah, he tripped a landmine in like Vietnam.
Okay, I thought that was a later edition, actually.
Yeah.
Old enough to have been in Vietnam. What the fuck?
Well, yeah. Remember, Iron Man was first debuted in the 60s.
Yeah.
And so in his origin, he was visiting the battlefield in Vietnam, and the attack happened, and he gets stuck in a cave, builds the Iron Man suit, and busts his way back home. Mm-hmm. In 2008, they just updated it to Afghanistan.
So would the veteran on the stream like to have a few moments to rant about the valorization of the veteran and how that doesn't translate to treating your veterans with any kinds of decency in real life?
Yeah. Well,
hashtag vetsploitation.
Yeah. Well, that being said, Tony Stark was never a veteran. Tony Stark was, a capitalist. He was there on an arms deal in both versions.
Yes, but he has a war wound. Yeah. And war wounds make characters sympathetic to American audiences.
Yeah.
It's a Purple Heart, isn't it? It's a shortcut to a Purple Heart.
Which is kind of funny because if we're talking vetsploitation, once again, like without being an actual veteran, Norman Osborn is the post-Vietnam image of the American veteran.
Yeah, like post-Vietnam veteran, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. And seeing as we've talked veterans and vetsploitation,
Yeah.
let's talk about the class issues permeating this movie.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay, so once again, I'm getting on my soapbox. Once again,
Yep.
right? America
Get the
likes,
hashtag up.
America likes to pretend two things about class in America. One, that it doesn't exist, and two, that
It's only a race thing.
yeah. Okay, class and race are very closely bound up all over the world, but America definitely has a class system. But America likes to pretend that it is against the class system, i.e., is egalitarian, and B, that it doesn't have a class system because of that. You will hear generally well-educated people say the words, America doesn't have a class system.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. You very much do. And it's really telling in this movie. And I think it says a lot about the culture of America in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, that these things were just part of the movie. And I don't even think they were necessarily deliberate points being made. I think they were just there. They seem very naturally part of the movie. Of every time there's a comment about money, watch this movie and you'll not unsee it.
Yeah.
It goes, rich boy, poor boy. We talk about how rich the rich boy is, and then poor boy, I've got $8.
Yeah.
We talk about rich guy, and we're immediately met with something that undermines that. And there's a rich people will tell you that there's virtue in being poor.
Yeah.
And this film really tries to hammer that point.
Well,
but you know what? Rich people are fucking stupid. There's no virtue in it. You just got to survive.
Well, especially since it's obvious, it's made obvious in the movie that, Harry is basically riding on his, father's coattails.
Yeah.
And Peter's, trying to
at the Thanksgiving dinner,
stand on his own. Yeah.
Yeah, you want. I can find my own work. You want to do it on your own. I can respect that. And the fact that the father, it's really obvious. The father thinks he's this self-made man. He probably is to some extent, but he has no respect for his son because his son hasn't worked for it. Whereas he looks at Peter and sees Peter working for it, and that's the American ideal. Someone who's working for it. There's a great quote of, there's no such thing as poverty in America. Everyone's just a temporarily embarrassed millionaire.
Or to pull a couple of quotes from Harry for the movie. Yeah, my dad got us a place.
Yeah.
Storm and Norman's making his weekly inspection, but he spent most of the time on the telephone.
Yeah. And it is very much this. It's quite obvious there, especially if you're, I'm sure like Scummer and I, we're so used to spotting class differences in media because we're both left-wingers that, we're both used to finding the Marxist reading in a piece of media because it's there. Yeah. But this really, I don't think it was deliberate. I genuinely think it was just part of the plot.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's deliberate because, like I said, you and I pick up on it. A lot of people who watch this probably don't, because let's face it, any point they're trying to get across in this movie, they're bashing you over the head with any point that they actually want to get across.
I don't think they are though. Because there's the line from the son of, Dad, these are public school kids. I can't show up to a school field day in a roller.
Yeah.
And it's.
And,
But there is this sense of, the American culture has this, there's this sense of shame in inheriting money.
Yeah.
You didn't work for it, it's not yours.
And that's.
There was back in 2000. There's not so much now.
It's
now it's perfectly okay to be the son of an emerald mine merchant who's completely incompetent and doesn't know his ass from his elbow.
In a way, I mean, it's a weird way because I'm not. In some ways, when I've watched this film, I don't know. In some ways, I feel a bit sorry for Harry in this movie because you just kind of get the impression that as a character that he really wants to shine in his dad's eyes, and he looks up to his father so much, and he never really does, you know. And so so that's that kind of thing.
But, in the context of discussing this in the context of the global war on terror, does that make Harry the avatar for George W. Bush?
Possibly.
You know, he's daddy's a little rich boy who's expected to be an overachiever.
Yeah, but he couldn't find his ass with two hands and
he can't live up to his father, you know.
You know.
And
the only way to impress daddy is to get all militaristic and fight it. Like, you do get that sense of...
And, well, yeah, because, you know, be a son to me, Peter.
Daddy won the war in how many days?
Yeah.
Sorry, are we still talking about Spider-Man? But yeah, you know, it's one of those. And it's... Whereas you see this gorgeous house and all the trappings of, you know, really classical villainy and money, which in and of itself is a point to be made that America makes its villains rich.
Yeah.
You know, it is just, that's just there. That's not even subtext. That's just there. But then you compare it to Peter growing up in what doesn't look like the nicest of areas.
Yeah.
Raised by his aunt and uncle, so there's obviously family traumatic history going on there. There's also his aunt and uncle are a lot older than you'd expect his parents to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also, you know, the girl he loves is the girl literally next door. The idea of him going out and meeting someone in the big city is just madness.
Yeah,
and I'm going to just say...
He's a small town boy living in the city. That's the problem.
Now, I understand for, like, time constraint and plot reasons why they did this. I just want to say, I definitely prefer the way Mary Jane was introduced in the comics to the way she was introduced to this, the way she's... Because in this movie, she is, like, the girl Peter has had a crush on forever and doesn't have the courage to talk to. I prefer the way it was done in the comics, where this is a girl next door that he hadn't seen her. You never see her for ages. And Aunt May keeps trying to set Peter up with her. And he does every bloody thing he can to avoid taking Mary Jane out. He's like, yeah, I'm sure she's a nice girl, Aunt May. I'm busy, you know. And eventually he has to bite the bullet. And then when he opens this door, there's this gorgeous redhead stood in front of him. And the first thing she says to him is, "Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot." It was like this thing, which I just...
Yeah, she's...
Yeah.
Elements of... She's very spunky in this movie. Like, there's elements of that, but not to that extent.
But it's... that was the whole difference between, like in the comics, Gwen Stacy was kind of the girl next door, kind of. And Mary Jane was the party girl kind of thing, you know?
Can I point out, for an 18-year-old girl, going up against 4 guys, she held her own there until he showed up. She was holding her own. Like, she handbag to the face for one of them, kick to the balls for the other. She was holding it.
Yeah.
Like, she was not doing too badly. Which made the final scene where she's really damsel in distress jarring. It's like, no, that girl hanging off that rope, scared to climb down, is not the same girl who was ready to take on 4 guys in a back alley. That's not the same girl.
I mean, arguably, you could say different situations elicit different trauma responses.
Yeah, but I think I'm terrified of heights, but
I think the best thing is Mary Jane's okay unless she's being like dangled off of the edge of something very high and which seems to happen a lot in this movie. I mean, okay, I'll just say this. I had a little joke before we went on air with Noodle and Ring about there is a drinking game with this movie, but I don't necessarily recommend that anyone does it because you will get messed up, and that is.
Yeah, I mean, except maybe with water, you'll be very hydrated.
Yeah, you'll be. Yeah. If you try whiskey, you are getting your stomach pump, and that is the take a drink every time Kirsten Dunst screams in this movie.
To be fair, you need a drink every time she screams because it's piercing.
Yeah. Back, but
and I'm not hating on Kirsten Dunst. I quite actually enjoy some.
Let's circle back to the discussion of class because there is also a very tied up in with that is a discussion on capitalism that.
Yes.
You know what a teenager would put himself through to get to try and get $3,000.
Yes, and Ring and I had this discussion while we were watching. That's a great criticism of capitalism. Knowing, just let this sink in. 3 minutes in the ring with a guy who you know is going to cripple you, is going to do serious damage to you.
I think my voice is a bit. I was going to break my Macho Man Randy.
Is ready.
Ooh, hold on, I can't. I don't think I can do it anymore. But oh yeah, the Macho Man Randy Savage is Bonesaw McGraw. Dig it?
Yeah, basically. But it's this thing of he stood there, and as he stood there, it's blink and you miss it. This moment. The guy who was in there before him, who got thrown out the thing, completely illegal move, by the way. You're probably grateful for the cage rather than that. But they pick him up, and as he's being carried away, you hear him screaming, I can't feel my legs. Oh, shit, I can't feel my legs.
Yeah.
For $3,000. Like, it's going to cost you more than that in hospital bills, dude.
Yeah.
Well, and ironically... Like, Peter's freaking out that it's a cage match, but ironically, being in a cage match, plays to his strengths a lot more than you.
Yeah. And to be honest, I'd rather be in a cage match in that situation, because if I get thrown, I'm going to hit the cage and land on the soft ground, not on a table where the judges are sat or in the audience.
Yeah, and also...
I'll just point out to you something. I did professional wrestling for a little while. Those rings ain't soft.
Well, they're softer.
Just trust me on that.
Okay, but they are softer than concrete.
A little, a bit. Just a bit, yes, I will say that.
You're not going to land on a table and end up with a piece of metal stuck through you if you land on them. They are relatively safer.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting at. Like, of the two options, if I was that desperate for $3,000, actually, no, I want to go to a pawn shop first. But if I was that desperate for $3,000, I'd rather the cage match.
I've got to say, as someone who grew up enjoying wrestling or whatever, and this is one of the last sort of things I've seen him in, I was almost a little bit sad to see how much Randy Savage was on fucking steroids in this movie. That physique. Because that was like scary overblown he was in that movie. It was that's a sidebar,
but there's a lot of things about. There's a great line earlier in the film when Uncle Peter is looking in the newspaper for work.
Yeah, Uncle Ben.
Ben. Where did Peter come from? Uncle Ben.
There's a guy in this. There's a character in this movie called Peter. I don't know if you know that movie.
All white people look the same to me. We've established this. So Uncle Ben is looking through the paper and he's like, computer technician, computer this, computer analyst. Even the computers need analysts these days, man. We were right. And this film, I tell you what really struck me about this film. None of them have mobile phones.
Yeah.
In less than 20 years, we've gone from mobile phones being a rarity, like the only one who has one is the big boss man, like the CEO, to if you don't have a mobile phone, like I know people who are living on benefits, on welfare for the Americans, who have smartphones because they need them for access to the internet because they don't have computers.
I'm the only one at the moment who doesn't have a smartphone, and I'm hoping that will be sorted out within a week or two. But
exactly, like the idea of not having a smartphone, not having a phone, like this is pre-Nokia's been popular.
Yeah.
Like my dad had a Nokia in 2001. My dad had the big one with the fucking aerial the size of.
Yeah.
He's still got that phone somewhere. He's probably still got a battery charge in a drawer somewhere.
I think the thing I picked up on in that scene, though, as well as this, is when he said he's 68 years old. He's still looking for a job. It's like, Chris, even in the UK, it's like you will be fucking retired by then, you know.
You will have retired. You may be looking for a part-time job.
Yeah, but generally, you know, but I mean, okay. Unfortunately, with the UK, we're heading that way. But certainly back when this movie was made, like
the idea of working past 65 was ridiculous.
Yeah, you might have a little bit of do something part time or something, but there was more. But that was more just in a way if you didn't have nothing to do, rather than needing the money a lot of the time. But the fact that he's 68 years old and he's like, I'm still trying to find full time work to keep going, and the computer thing, like we were saying, computer this, computer that. I'm there thinking, God, this is Daniel Blake by 10 years before that movie was made.
Yeah, it's this thing of. Like the idea of a 65 in 2000, if you were 68 years old, you were looking for a job. You had your state pension. You could easily live off that. You were guaranteed an income. You had your state pension. You'd work for a living. Maybe the women would volunteer in charity shops, like 2 days a week, just for something to do. But mostly she'd spend her days at bingo. And the guys would spend most of the days like down the pub, 3 pints in a day, and they just sit gabbing all day. Like that was the image of retirement in the UK in 2001. Like broadly, very broadly. Obviously, community centres, other things as well. But the idea was you've worked, you've paid your dues. It's now the country is looking after you. So. Yeah. Now, looking at it from a UK perspective, I'm not expected to retire in the UK till I'm 68, and that'll go up before I hit that age.
There won't even be. No, there won't even be. I mean, there won't even be a state pension.
Yeah, it's like I am genuinely in my generation, people my age. I genuinely, most of us have opted out of paying into pensions because we are not expected to live long enough to claim them.
Yeah,
and that's a fact of life, and that. When I was saying that at 15, like 10, 12 years ago, that was a weird thing to say, and people thought I was being morbid or being, but now it's just a fact of life, and that's how quickly times change. And that is post-2008 financial crash.
Let's put it this way.
Like that before then is just, what's wrong with your country?
Let's put it this way. When I started working where I am now, there was a very good pension scheme. I could have quite easily retired if we still had that. I could have quite easily and comfortably retired at 60. If I can retire at 65 now, I'll count myself lucky.
Yeah.
I flat out don't pay. I don't pay into pensions because I don't see the point. Like, I have other savings accounts that I do. I don't pay into pensions. Do you know what it is? I came up in the time when I saw the bosses raiding the M&S pension pot, and it was all over the news. And that, for my generation, we were about 18, 19 when that happened, I think.
Yeah.
We looked at that and we went, I don't trust pensions anymore. I'm going to keep my money I'm going to keep my money to myself. I'm not paying into a pension. I don't trust it. Why should I pay for 30, 40 years to have it taken away from me 2 days before I'm due to retire?
Yeah. I mean, the greatest example is, I don't know, you probably would have been really, really young when this happened with the Mirror Group. one.
I know of it, but I'm not old enough to remember it.
Robert Maxwell when he raided their pension
I know
funds.
of it.
Yeah,
I've got family
His-
and friends who were.
yeah. His
well.
daughter's been in the news quite a bit recently. We'll just say that much.
Yeah.
But
But yeah, just going back to we were talking about that. I'm going to take us back to propaganda because I want to talk about something.
okay.
And everything I said about New Yorkers coming together and solidarity and all that jazz.
Yeah.
It's pure propaganda, and this film proves it. I have 3 words for you: Unity Day Festival.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even subtle.
Brought to you by Oscorp.
Exactly, it's not even subtle. But this film, we talk about all these things this film does and hits you around the head with.
Yeah.
But it's still relatively subtle compared to the latest Avengers movie.
Yeah.
When you put those two side by side, it's like, what happened to media literacy in those years? Oh yeah, they stopped teaching it because they needed soldiers for their wars. Like,
Yeah. Or rather, stating the joke that pokes to the tropes became the popular, mode of in content criticism.
Yeah. I will say also, how did we ever think teenagers looked like that? Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst in this movie do not look 18.
Yeah, and like James Franco looks maybe 25 at the youngest.
Yeah, like he looks like he's pushing 30.
Yeah. That is something that, you can definitely say about the later Spider-Man castings is that Peter and his friends do actually look more like teenagers.
You can say that.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't look like that when I was a teenager. Holy hell.
I mean,
I don't look as old as some of them now.
I mean, Tom Holland still has a late teens look to him.
If you say so. I value my marriage. I'm going to let that one slide. But there's this. Okay. What else have I got here? Speaking of propaganda, tangentially related to propaganda, product placement. Dr. Pepper.
Samsung on the New York or on the Times building.
Yep. New Rolls Royce.
Yep.
Even when he's looking through the car magazine, he stops and he looks at a Jaguar and an Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
And all the ones that are high priced have got brand names on them, but the cheap car just says sports car.
Yeah.
It's not even subtle. It's just, it's really, really telling. And yet it's still more subtle than what we get nowadays.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, isn't it? But the reason I bring that up is because because product placement, newspapers survive on advertising.
Yeah.
But there's also something else that is we've learned since this movie, but we didn't know at the time because it was considered strictly necessary to have a little something called journalistic integrity. And look, Jameson is a dick. He is a world-class prick. Yeah, he is. He is a right royal prick. He's arrogant. He's rude. He's ignorant. He's the kind of guy you want to slap him and then slap him again to make sure you get both sides. You know, he's
Now,
but he is by far the most heroic character in this movie.
Yeah.
He has journalistic integrity. He's ready to die to protect his source, to protect his who's not even his, who's a freelancer.
Yeah, who's getting paid, typical freelance rates, and
get
you a meat box at Christmas, and that'll be it.
I'm just going to point out $300 for a front page photo, even in 2002.
Yeah,
Peter was being ripped off badly. He should have been paid a lot more than that.
Yeah.
When the paper has to do 4 runs because it's got one of his pictures on the front. Like, first of all, did he even get a byline?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like he did.
Actually, if you look at the newspaper, it does say photo by Peter Parker.
It does, but apparently the Green Goblin didn't notice that.
Yeah.
So he gets his byline, but $300 for a photograph, for a front page photo. I love the fact that Jane Jameson, like this guy, he's willing to die to protect Peter, but he's not willing to pay him a fair wage, and that's just America in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That guy's the most American person in the room.
And I'm probably gonna save the bulk of this if we ever do Spider-Man No Way Home. If we ever do Spider-Man No Way Home. But I do like how, even though they kept J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson, they rebranded him as an old school yellow journalist, headline chaser, to basically Alex Jones.
Oh.
Yeah. Like.
Oh, hello. So I wasn't listening in, but I think in the No Way Home they kind of made him into a bit of an Alex Jones type, didn't they? But,
yeah.
Can I point something out? J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah. Senior.
Yeah. There's a J. Jonah Jameson Jr. as well, so.
I'm assuming that. Look, there's an undercurrent, and this might be a stretch, but Jonah's not a Christian name.
Right.
Yeah.
And the guy who controls the headlines, not Christian, has undercurrents that I don't like.
It's Stanley, basically, isn't it? I mean, you can tell as well. This is Stanley poking fun at himself a bit, I think.
Also, like, if I remember right, J. Jonah Jameson was basically, part Stanley poking fun at himself and part Stanley taking a jab at a certain Dr. Wortham.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I get it, but in 2022, it has implications that I don't.
Yeah, I can see that. By the way, I don't know if you saw what I put in the. I don't know if you saw what I put in the chat while I was listening in. But
I
was like, Carlsberg don't do product placement, but if they did,
I still think if Carlsberg made photographs, it definitely would be a way of coming up behind Maggie Thatcher.
I only put that in because I know that's the first time I noticed that in this movie. It was when he was chasing the guy that killed Uncle Ben or whatever, and he's there on the top of the Carlsberg truck.
Yeah. Carlsberg don't do product placement, but if they did.
Yeah.
By the way, just because I'm drinking Foster's at the moment, that is not official product placing on Media Musings.
Look, you should. Any stream I'm on will never be sponsored because I cannot be trusted not to piss the sponsors off.
Yeah.
No.
Just take that as given.
Yeah.
Product placement. some of the product placement's funny, but the reason I bring up the implication with Jonah Jameson is because there's a couple of weirdly religious undertones in this movie, and I'm hoping the comic book familiarity will help here.
Yeah.
My understanding of Spider-Man is that the original run of Spider-Man was written by a Jewish fella.
Yeah,
Stan Lee. Yeah.
I don't know what religion I barely know
his real name
goes up in movies with a cap.
Stan Lee, just so you know, I mean, if you haven't heard it, that's a pen name. His real name is Stanley Lieber.
Ah, yes, of course, yes.
And drawn by Steve Ditko, but I don't know what his religious affiliation was.
The reason I point that out, there's a few things here. Aunt May, and therefore we presume by extension Peter, because this is who raised him, is a Catholic.
Yeah.
And so is Osborn. Am I the only one who... Maybe because you're not Catholic, you don't know. When Aunt May's saying her prayer,
yeah,
the Green Goblin tells her, finish it. Deliver us from evil.
Yeah.
Only Catholics stop there in that prayer. Protestants have...
For thine is the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Yes. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, which was added on by Henry VIII. And it's one of those moments, because I was raised Catholic, I notice it.
Yeah.
Because there's a standard joke of Catholic Protestant wedding, standing up to say the prayer, and the Catholics sit down and the Protestants are still going. Standard joke. There's a great sketch. Darrow O'Brien does a great sketch on it. But there's that. And then you've got Jonah's name, which indicates, again, those implications that I don't like, but they were okay for the time, because we didn't live in a time when, you know, those kind of things were given decent airplay. And it's, again, it's this Spider-Man as the outsider.
Yeah.
As the underdog, as the minority.
Okay,
I will hold my hands up. Calling Catholics a minority is a fine line to tread, particularly like in the white English-speaking world. But in America, yes.
Okay, so that being said, I am going to break our rule that we kind of agreed to, and I'm going to bring up Spider-Man 3 since we're not going to be covering it.
Yeah.
Because this touches on the religious discussion. And it is one of the better scenes in Spider-Man 3, and it does harken back to, you know, stuff that was lifted from the comics. Because when Spider-Man goes to, you know, figures that the symbiote is affecting him negatively, you know, where it's bringing out the worst in him, he goes to a church, or he goes to a cathedral and uses the church bell to almost literally exorcise it.
I was just saying,
suit off of him.
They should have just played the tubular bells at that point, shouldn't they?
And
the same job,
and you know, and of course, Eddie Brock is there down in the main, you know, area below, praying that God will kill Spider-Man for him, and the symbiote falls on him, and Eddie becomes Venom.
Is it a Catholic church or a Protestant church? Because I've never seen that movie. I assume you called it a church cathedral, so it's Catholic. But
yeah,
it's a church. I can't remember.
Well, I mean,
was the crucifix gory?
I think it was.
Right, it was
Catholic. It's Catholic.
But that being said, you know, most Protestant churches don't really have bell towers in the U.S.
Yeah, okay.
That I've seen.
I mean, the old style Puritan church is the white one with the tower dome, but yeah.
I mean,
they're small town America.
And also, if you are gonna be filming a scene taking place, a dramatic scene taking place in a church.
Catholic
It's got to
churches
be,
on good occasion.
yeah, it's got to be a cathedral because you got that Gothic architecture going on.
Yeah, they definitely give good occasion. I'll give them that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's that. So you've got all these sort of. It's the idea that everyone in this movie is a minority to some extent. But there's a great line from the newspaper editor where he says to Peter, "I trust my barber."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the look on Peter's face as if to go, "Dude, you really shouldn't."
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's this thing of there are like 4 people in your life who you have to be able to trust.
Yeah.
Without question. Your barber, your tailor, your priest, and your undertaker.
Yeah.
Think about it. And that was just really that felt like a cultural nod to that almost mafia-esque culture that's very steeped in Catholicism of trust and all this. And the newspaper does give a little bit of mafia vibes. It gives off vibes like he'd make a good mafia boss.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an editor for a newspaper. He's not that far off, but
yeah,
he's and I say that with all affection, as in, have you seen what newspapers are printing these days?
And but to bring up another thing, we're talking about Spider-Man 2002, Sam Raimi, and the American Mythos, and one of the things that it does is make callbacks to the original American superhero or the superhero.
Superman, yes. Yeah, I noticed that a couple of times.
When he's running and he pulls the shirt up.
Yeah.
And May flat out says to him, "You're not Superman."
Yeah.
And that's really funny to me. I've literally got written down here just Superman.
Yeah. Where, Sam Raimi, makes the makes the homage to the scene in Superman where Clark, pulls.
Yeah, when he's running and pulls his. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is quite obvious in that extent that Spider-Man is a little bit of a satire on Superman.
Yeah.
And there's definitely an argument for that.
Well,
I think possibly. I mean, because when we talk about like big budget superhero movies, I mean, Superman was really in '78. Superman was probably the first real big budget superhero movie sort of thing. So
it's also like actually there's a few things like it's really important that Peter, when he chases the guy who kills Uncle Ben, it's really important that Peter wasn't the one to push him out the window.
Yeah.
That harkens back to Superman as well, and this, we don't kill, we bring justice and everything else.
I wouldn't say a satire of Superman. I would say more an homage.
An homage would be better, yeah.
It's a heartfelt, I think, very affectionate, gentle ribbing.
Maybe the ribbing is more from the Marvel DC rivalry, but because 1978 Superman was, and this is coming from someone who hasn't actually seen the 1978 Superman, but
future media using his episode, bring.
It was very much a lift from the basically bring the comic book to life kind of trying to do movie. And we got a little bit of that with Tim Burton's Batman and a little bit of the Silver Age version of that with Joel Schumacher, but then
I'm sorry, say that name again.
Joel Schumacher.
Is that the same, Scummer? Is that the same last name that's famous in Formula One?
Yeah.
Okay,
Same
we're
name,
gonna
yeah.
have words about how you pronounce that name, Rick.
But
I just say Schumacher. Well,
after
tends to be how I say it, but
after Batman and Robin flopped,
because it was shit. Let's be clear about that. Was a shit movie.
Well, you know, a movie's bad when it gets parodied by Only Fools and Horses.
Like I've got.
No,
like,
that was no. Be fair, that was the Batman TV series that got parodied by Only Fools.
I've got things to say about Batman and Robin because it made a movie that I very much believe deserves cinema play a direct-to-video release, and I'm not happy about that, but I'll save that for when we're talking about Mask of the Phantasm.
Oh, we're doing that. I love that movie.
In January.
Yeah, I love that movie.
But anyways, after Batman and Robin, superhero movies kind of became ashamed of being superhero movies. Mm-hmm. They were more, actions. They tried to be action sci-fi but with Spider-Man we got a return to this is a superhero movie. We're just lifting it from the comic book pages, and I think that's why we're getting the homages to the 1978 Superman, especially since despite Spider-Man, despite a lot of the scenes being shot, especially with the confrontation with, the carjacker being shot something like it would have been out of a Batman film where, Spider-Man is lurking in the shadows and ambushing him. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man is generally a more, at least on the surface, a cheerier, happier type of. He's more akin on the Superman light, cheery side of things.
Yeah, he's a kid. And I think it's important because there's something I've written down here just to put in. He's a teenager. He's a child. And what I learned from this movie is the reason they make superheroes teenagers is because no grown-ass adult is that fucking reckless when they discover they have superpowers.
Well, this is the thing in a way. This is one of the reasons Spider-Man was a bit of a mold breaker in a way, was that he was a teenager.
Yeah.
At least going back to the original comics, because I mean, we've heard Stan Lee's must have talked about this hundreds of times. I'm sure.
In the Silver Age, the convention was you don't get a teen hero. The teenagers are the sidekicks, and they're
Batman
there
has his Robin, and
they're literally there for just audience insertion. Which is actually why, Shazam was so popular in the 30s to where it almost eclipsed Superman. So DC sued Fawcett Comics into oblivion, but we're going to cover that in March.
We'll just say, let's call it what it is, not Shazam, Captain Marvel, as it was then, yes,
Yeah, we're going to cover that in March when we talk about the movie Shazam.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've got a lot to look forward to because I enjoy that movie as well.
Yeah. So the reason, again, bringing that up,
but
talking about the heroism of Spider-Man for a second.
Yeah.
There's something I want to point out, and it's not necessarily a positive thing, but it is an important thing about how far we've come as a culture. Now, taking in mind everything I said about Hollywood only puts things on screen that are safe and that the culture agrees with.
Yeah.
Spider-Man's, and I wrote it, casual homophobia. Blink and you miss it, but it's there. When he's in the ring and he says to the guy, "Nice outfit. Did your husband buy that for you?"
Yeah.
That wouldn't fly in a modern film,
Yeah.
for very good reasons. But I think it's important to note how far we come so fast. We're looking at a film where mobile phones weren't a thing, where journalists had integrity, casual homophobia was fine. There are no black people in this movie. And you look at this movie.
There are no names
except Robbie Robertson, who's in about like 2 scenes in this movie.
There are no named black characters.
There are no named black characters in this movie. The only woman in it is there as a love interest and has no agency of her own.
Well, and Aunt May.
So you've either got the pretty girl or the grandma. Those are the two archetypes women fit into in movies in 2001, 2002. And I think it's important sometimes to just take a moment and look at how far we've come so fast.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm not saying to cancel Spider-Man, don't anyone say that. But I think it's, you get teenagers who are the age these characters is supposed to be, who don't remember that life was like that.
Mm.
And it's jarring.
And this may be me looking at the movie through 2022 eyes, and B, a nostalgia for the movie. But I kind of well, yes, it is, casual homophobia. I can see that, but I also kind of saw that line as a crack at is toxic hypermasculinity.
Mm.
I mean, you could read it that way, but the fact that they put that joke, which was obviously meant to make the guy angry, in the mouth of the hero.
Yeah.
There's no other way of looking at that. That's pure homophobia.
Yeah.
But this is a really important point I want to make, because I see Ring's face as I've said that. You are allowed to like things that are problematic now.
Yeah.
You are allowed to like things that are not good now, but were okay at the time. You don't have to be this shining paladin of goodness and ethics and morality. We all start somewhere. Yeah. And if we got rid of every piece of media that had even a moment of problematic, moment, we'd have nothing left.
We'd have shit media. We really would.
Fuck all left.
Yeah. Coming out of a culture where every bit of media had to be pure according to your, ideology, it is a bland, boring, and freakishly bizarre landscape. If you want to look at a good example, check out our stream where we cover the introduction to the Story Keepers.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm saying this as someone who's quite left wing. I don't mind some media that's problematic. I really don't. If I don't mind being challenged.
Yeah.
No, but again, there's a line between.
There is a line between it. I mean, obviously, there's certain stuff obviously that has no redeeming value whatsoever. Like that film Ben Shapiro funded, Die Hard in the fucking school. That was whatever. But I mean, even some stuff we've covered on this channel. Okay, like look, I like this. I like the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns.
Mm.
Yeah, they're hugely problematic in a lot of ways, but I enjoy them.
Yeah, and this is the thing: you're allowed to enjoy them. And there is this culture rising up, and I see it because I spend a lot of time in fandom spaces of teenagers, especially, who think that media has to be unproblematic. No, it doesn't. Your reception of media has to be critical. That doesn't mean having a go at the media or having a go at people who like the media. What it means is when you see something on screen, you know better than to imitate it in life.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you shouldn't be relying on a movie to tell you something is bad.
Yeah.
Okay? If watching someone do something bad on a movie is enough to make you think that bad thing is okay, that's not the movie's problem, it's yours, and you need to sort that shit out.
Yeah.
Because, if you reach the age where you're old enough to watch a movie and you haven't grasped that yet, you need to have a word with your English teacher and with your parents. Because something's gone wrong somewhere. Like, presuming you're neurotypical, etc., all those caveats. But
and presuming your parents aren't the problem.
Yeah, presuming your parents aren't the problem. But that's, it's... To be fair, though, if your parents are the problem, have a word and have it loudly, because they need to hear it. They're probably the ones who need to hear it. But it's... There's this push to all media has to be unproblematic and comfy and soft and... No.
Yeah.
No. Drama drives a narrative.
Yeah.
Drama, by its very nature, is problematic.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want an unproblematic coffee shop story where, that's it's boring and it's bland and you're not going to learn the same lessons you would learn from media. And as much as I say you're allowed to like things and you have to engage critically with media, even popcorn movies like this. There's a reason we've talked about it for nearly 2 hours. Because even popcorn media has something to say, and you have to understand what it's saying and then decide for yourself whether you agree or not. And there's nuance to that discussion. You can like a certain bit, but not that bit. Like Channel Punching Bag, I remember a time when those books were progressive. The idea of an intelligent girl who didn't take shit and who stood up for herself, or fighting against oppressive regimes, or all these things that were in the books.
Or, literally coming out of the closet into a magical world that accepts you.
Exactly. It was a time that was progressive, and now we look back and people think that you have to say, oh, they were always terrible, and they were bad. She used too many adverbs and they were aimed at kids. But you know what? We are the kids who read those books. She would not be a problem if those books hadn't been such a massive success. They were a success because they were progressive and they spoke to a young generation. That's okay. It's okay to have liked things that are not progressive anymore. It's okay to still like those things. It doesn't make you...
I mean, and the thing is, sometimes certain media doesn't hold up. It would not hold up well today. But at the time, it was challenging. And it made you think. Now, I'll give a just short story. One of David Tennant's very early roles in television, he was on a British sitcom called Rabsy Nesbitt, and David Tennant, he was in it for one episode as a transgender barmaid. Now, nowadays, we look back on that, it can be quite cringeworthy. It would be really cringeworthy if you watch this particular thing nowadays, because but this is like one of the first times that there was actually a representation of like trans people on British TV that actually did at least try somewhat to explain what being trans was. Now, does it hold up nowadays? No, you watch it now, it's like, oh, this is you cringe. But at the time, you look at that thinking, this is actually quite challenging, and it makes you think about something in a different way.
Yeah, you were cringing for a totally different reason. It's like, can you imagine 2022 casting Tom Hanks as a gay man?
Yeah.
There's a classic movie and it won Oscars in the 90s.
Yeah, Philadelphia,
Yeah. It's times change and we change with them. But there are lines, and I think as a culture we are coming up to a reckoning where we're going to have to take a step back and say, hang on, have we come full circle here and gone from not saying these things because they were bad to not saying these things because they are bad, and the only difference is who gets to decide what the bad things are?
Yeah.
There is a danger in that. And this is why we spend so long talking every week, because there's nuance to every discussion.
Yeah.
It's not a simple answer. And what it comes down to is personal responsibility and education. And,
or, as the wise man said, with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
Oh, damn, Ring, that's got to be the closer. We've got to close the stream now.
Yep.
Nah, we've still got
We
things
can't-
to talk
We
about.
can't top that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But speaking of that wise man also knew not to have a flowery death scene that lasted half an act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, a man of few words, but whose identity really permeates this movie.
Yeah.
And permeates, I think, the whole Spider-Man
Yeah,
franchise.
it is. I mean, the whole Uncle Ben's death is kind of the thing that is
He's the inciting incident.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, really, in a way, it's Spider-Man's. It's a big thing behind Spider-Man as a character, his motivation.
Yeah, it is the martyr. It is the source of Peter's martyr complex.
Yeah,
but also, it's a sort of martyr complex, and driven by, in a way, guilt that he could have prevented that and he didn't.
Yeah.
In a way, you feel he's kind of driven by a sense of guilt for his uncle's death, that he feels responsible, and that's kind of what drives him.
Yep.
Yeah. No, and it very much so. But I think with this one, it's a classic inciting incident, but it's more than that, because Uncle Ben is. Take a moment to think. What kind of a person or what kind of a character would Spider-Man be? Because he'd still be Spider-Man because he still got bitten.
Yeah.
If Uncle Ben hadn't been killed. Like, that's the AU I want to see.
Yeah.
Like, what if Uncle Ben wasn't killed?
Well, actually,
Spider-Man has a father.
And introducing the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, Spider-Man. There you go.
I don't think so, though, because I think Peter had got him. Ben had got him on the straight and narrow. Ben had had someone to talk to and guide him.
Well, actually, in the House of M, when Wanda reshaped the Marvel universe into the House of M universe to give everyone their happy life, Uncle Ben didn't die, and Spider-Man is still a celebrity, and Uncle Ben's kind of acting as his manager / agent.
Exactly. Uncle Ben would have watched out for him and been there for him. Because Peter's lack of male guidance is very, very obvious in this film.
Yeah.
Like, there's this whole thing of, to the point where the villain uses it against him to try and manipulate it. But there's this great circular narrative of he starts out the movie telling Peter, stop pretending to be my father, and telling Ben, stop pretending to be my father, and ends it saying, I had a father, his name was Ben.
Godspeed, Spider-Man.
Yeah. And it's that teenagers are cruel, but they mean well at heart, I think. Spider-Man is very much a teenager. I keep saying this, but I watched this film when I was like 10 or 11, and I watch it again now, and it's like, you know, you're an adult when things the villain says start to make sense.
Yeah.
It's like watching The Little Mermaid. As a teenager, you think 16 is all grown up. As an adult, you're thinking, sit down, child, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's that. And there's a lot of things that jump out at you, like the class issues here of rich people don't talk about their feelings.
Yeah.
Rich people don't do feelings in this movie. And And also, private education made his mates stupid, clearly.
Yeah.
But
well, yeah, and you could arguably say that suppressing, his emotions, was really what made Norman the Goblin, and the serum was merely the catalyst.
yes. No, absolutely, because it's right there in the foreshadowing of this drove the rats insane in that one trial.
Yeah.
It's driving him insane. It's not making him do anything that he wasn't capable of beforehand.
It's pushing him over the edge in a certain sense, isn't it?
He's been. If you've ever had a psychotic reaction to a drug, you know what he's going through. And he's not necessarily himself.
Yeah.
Or he's not necessarily himself with inhibitions.
Follow the shiver up your spine.
That line, I swear, follow the cold shiver running down your spine.
Yeah.
That is just... Sometimes there are lines in movies and books that feel like you need to offer them up on a plate to the gods of writing, because it feels like they were dropped there by the gods of writing.
Yeah.
And that is just...
Yeah.
It's a classic. Nothing says villainy like a line like that.
Yeah.
And the delivery is so perfect. But the reason I was talking about Uncle Ben permeating the film, the main characters of this film are not on screen. Like, we don't see them.
Yeah.
They're... And I'm going to tie this back to 9/11, because again, the main characters in this film, Uncle Ben, the Goblin, or the voice, there's the Twin Towers. They're not there, but they're there.
Yeah.
It's like you can't miss it.
Yeah.
And it's a really... And I think that might be why this film was received in the way it was, because you were already primed to see what wasn't there as there. So the 9/11 being in it's very easy to read into something where you're already being primed to read into it.
Yeah. And which is why, like I said, you can't talk about American cinema post 9/11 without talking about Spider-Man.
Yeah. And then you've got Daddy's little rich boy who's no real friend, who immediately goes after the girl and uses Peter's lines to do it. And but then you've got the father who, as the Green Goblin, understands mob mentality.
Yeah.
The two characters who really understand mob mentality in this film, the newspaper editor and Osborn, they understand that people can turn on a headline.
Yeah.
And again, that's something. By the time this film was released, they're already in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And they're gearing up for Iraq, and that machine's set off. So, like we said, in the space of days, it went from a shining example of the brotherhood of humanity to the fuck.
Yeah.
In days. Like,
yeah.
And this film really highlights that.
Yes. Yeah. It was released May 3rd, 2002.
Yeah. So you're an adult when the villains start to sound like they've legit got a point. But that's kind of what I wanted to bring it back to, because, again, popcorn movie. Sit down, watch it, enjoy the web slinging, enjoy the wisecracks, cover your ears when Kirsten Dunst screams because holy shit, girl. But this film's got saying a lot without saying anything.
Yeah.
And is everything we said deliberate or intentional on the part of the writers, directors, and creators? Probably not. But you know what? It sounds good, and that's all you need to make happen to like talk philosophy or literature.
When it comes to media reception, or when it comes to critical, media literacy, there are two there are two people bringing meaning into a piece of media. There's the author, and then there's the audience.
Yeah. And that's I think that's basically one of our main philosophical points is we sit here and a lot of the stuff I come out with I know is a stretch, you know, but if that's how I've received it, then that's just as valid as anyone else's opinion on it. Or if that's how I can see it being received, then that's just as valid.
And I mean, you know, and my introducing the idea of Spider-Man as the metaphor of how America sees itself could arguably just be my reception of it. But then, of course, there is the fact that the last shot of the movie is Spider-Man right next to the American flag.
Yeah, and that's the point. If you've got a reception of a piece of media, book, movie, television, song, whatever, you can receive that however the fuck you please, as long as you can back it up. As long as you can point to where in the text it tells you, then you can back it up. Yeah. At least from an academic standpoint. If it's just you have a cute headcanon and you enjoy it, that's valid too. Just don't try and claim it's canon.
Yeah. Now, there is something that we have that there is a topic that we haven't really mentioned, but I'm going to put a pin in it for next week because it is also a big theme in Spider-Man 2.
Go on.
And that is science makes us monsters.
Yeah, technology makes us monsters. Yeah. Science makes us superheroes.
Yeah, technology makes us monsters. And yeah, we're like I said, I'm putting a pin in that because that is a big part of Spider-Man 2.
Yeah. Or I would say science and technology makes us heroes, greed makes us monsters in this movie.
Yeah.
Because in this movie, the reason the Green Goblin exists is because Osborn doesn't want to lose the military contract and doesn't want to lose his job.
Yeah. Mm. So, arguably, with the addition of Spider-Man 2, you could say the thesis is more ambitious. It, can be expanded into ambition makes us monsters. But like I said, that's a discussion for next week.
Yes. But yeah. Let's leave that for next week because there's a lot to say on that. But yeah, again, it's classic superhero. Every time we talk about superhero movies, we get down to greed makes us monsters.
Yeah.
Which is really funny in the context of capitalist society like America.
Yeah.
Like America knows what its faults are, it just doesn't do shit about them.
Yep.
It'd rather create propaganda that makes out like it knows what its faults are and is dealing with them than actually deal with them because making the propaganda is cheaper. I don't know. That's my theory.
So, with that, remember, so next week we will be concluding our discussion of superheroes in the American mythos with Spider-Man 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the week after that, since Noodle is going to be at a comm, I get to talk about the Iron Giant. So we're going to be talking about the American mythos and the Cold War through the lens of the Iron Giant.
America is not a young child who doesn't understand technology and wants to make friends with it. It likes to pretend it is, but it's not. See everything I've said over the last 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, so have fun with that. I don't like the Iron Giant. I never gelled with it.
Which is why I'm doing the Iron Giant when you're not present. Because
I might join you with that. I haven't watched the Iron Giant yet, so if you've got a watch party available, I'll try and jump on for that ring. So, hey, sorry, I'll just give away some trade secrets there. Yes, sometimes we have some pre-stream watch parties for stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's all fresh in our minds.
So, sorry, I'll give it away a little trade secret of behind the scenes of Media Musings.
Yeah.
So, Scummer, you have anything coming up?
Not really. I've been sort of somewhat taking a bit of a break from YouTube. There is an update about my channel that I posted a week or two ago. If
Yes.
you want to go and watch that, please go and knock yourself out.
Knock you out.
Yeah. Okay. That's not
But-
very nice, but I'm gonna try and get back to doing some more regular content again soon. Just with a lot that's been going on in my life, with work stuff and just outside stuff, whatever. I've just been in one of those little phases where I'm not really motivated to.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with too much stuff, but hopefully I can get back to putting some more regular content up a bit soon.
Look, you've got enough on your plate. You're a union man, and you're battling.
And we're in the fight of our fucking lives. Let's put it that way.
You've got enough on your plate.
Yeah, and
for those who haven't gathered, Scum is a postie. So yeah. Support your posties, support your nurses, support your doctors, support your who else is on strike? You train people.
BT workers.
Just support your workers.
Support your trade unions, guys. You know.
And this coming week, or this coming week, we are entering into peak. So Media Musings is literally probably going to be the only thing I do channel wise. And up through, we're up through December is going to be, we're doing the Mega Mythos month because the last week of December is, the last Sunday of December is Christmas, and we're not going to. You might as well lump these 2 months together. So the final lineup is Spiderman 2, then Iron Giant, and then iRobot. And for the beginning of the new year, we are going to be discussing the Disney Renaissance and opening with Mask of the Phantasm as a example of other studio animation during that time.
As a counterexample.
Yeah, as a counterexample.
And I love that movie. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. I was gonna put up a poll for either All Dogs Go to Heaven or the Page Master, but then Kevin Conroy died, so I'm gonna say, hey, it's my stream, my rules.
Which Ring doesn't do enough of, so I support this because I need my spouse to be a little bit more assertive sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that's all the bookkeeping taken care of, so might as well go to taglines. Scummer?
I don't really do taglines. I'll just say support your unions.
Take care, be good, and if you can't be good, remember, use your noodle.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that.